I want to describe this experience to you. Whenever you're in a situation, and if you take the time after that situation and you write down your criteria for making decisions, then you will have that for the next time that thing comes along. And what happens is the same things happen over and over again for the same kind of reasons, but you don't see that. You're operating in a way where you take them one at a time. And so I would recommend to you that you write those principles down. When you do that, you think about them in a deeper way, and then the people that are in your lives then start to understand how you're behaving, and they can be partners in that idea, meritocratic decision making, so that they can also say, is that the best way to operate and deal with that situation? And so you start to think in a more principled way rather than all of these bits and pieces of different things. So that would be my recommendation. But what I'm going to do is take you through a little bit of my journey, and it's totally correct, as Peter says. I'm really a very ordinary guy who, through trial and error, discovered some things that worked that helped me do what Peter was describing. So what I want to explain is, like, we look at the world, and there are just so many different things to have principles for. Principles are essentially recipes for dealing with situations that happen over and over again. And there's just a million things you could study. You could be a doctor, you could be a physicist, you could be someone. And the things that I understand and spend time with was economics, investments, and then work. And my approach was largely captured in this slide, which is to say, I would go after audacious goals, and then I would succeed and fail, and most importantly, benefited from failure. In other words, you go after your goals, and you then encounter your problems or your failures. And how you're dealing with those problems is one of the most important things. I started to realize, for reasons you'll probably see as we go along, that pain plus reflection equals progress. In other words, that painful situation, if you can diagnose what produced that failure and then develop principles for dealing with it at a different time, in a different way, and then you take those principles and you improve, you learn, you change things, then you improve and you make go on to more audacious goals. And the way I look at life is pretty much like it's this looping process, this evolutionary looping process. That means you go after your audacious goals, you fail, you learn. Failure is an important part of that process. You learn principles, you keep improving. And so I think that I learned that there are only 5 things that you need to do to be successful. If you do these 5 things, you will be successful. And the first is to be clear on what your goals are. You have to know what you're going after. You can't have everything in the world, but you could have almost anything you want, but you can't have everything you want. If you go after your goals and they're clear, you have to know your goals. And along the way, number 2 is you have to identify and not tolerate your problems. A lot of people tolerate problems. And then you have to diagnose those problems to get at the root cause of those problems. And often the root cause is you. Maybe you have weaknesses, maybe you make mistakes. And with that, or maybe somebody else is making mistakes. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And the power of being able to know our strengths and weaknesses and know how to deal with them is enormous. And only when you know what your problems are and you diagnose that specifically, can you create a design to get around those problems. And that design, very specific design, you go get around the problems, and then if you have a design, you have to be reliable in doing that. And everybody is bad at some of these steps. And the key is to work with other people who are good where you're weak. So I just want to give you a sense of failure. I think probably the greatest problem of mankind, it's a big statement, biggest problem of mankind, the greatest tragedy of mankind is individuals who have in their minds wrong opinions that they're attached to. And they could so easily stress test those to put them out there and find out if they're strong or weak in terms of those opinions, and to move beyond that to make better decisions. And it's a tragedy because it could be so easily dealt with. You can reduce the chances of being wrong by properly stress testing.